Who are the children of Abraham, and how should those children act and behave? The author of the Book of Wisdom begins to reflect a little on their history and how they had suffered so much, been sustained by the Passover meal, delivered from slavery. But if we look at the story of Abraham, probably taking place around 1700 years before Christ, we see one migrating nomad that, for no apparent reason from the human perspective, had revealed to him the presence of a living, loving, transcendent God that cared about him and his wife and made a great promise to them of a great and rich prosperity and posterity. What a story. What do we make of that story? The faith of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That ancient tale of the divine erupting into the human heart and mind and imagination. Well, the author of Hebrews interprets it from the perspective of one who is following another Hebrew, Jesus of Nazareth. And he compares the two, blends the two, and shows that great story of faith coming alive. Now, we cannot understand anything about the Gospels, about the New Testament, unless we understand the history of salvation found in the Hebrew Scriptures. It's as simple as that. Everything is based on the history of the law, the prophets, the story of Israel. And all of Jesus' first followers were Jews, and they all were steeped in that tradition. And they embraced it, and they saw in the person of Christ the fulfillment of the hopes and dreams of Israel. Now, Jesus himself would die on the cross for all of humanity. And he would be inviting, through his Spirit-filled disciples, the whole world to become children of Abraham in faith. At the Second Vatican Council, there was a pivotal doctrine, Nostra Aetate. It's very short, a few pages really, which over 2,000 bishops, under the power of the Spirit, voted for and embraced. It was a moment that not only changed a great deal of the attitude of the church, but has actually given the world hope. A world in which there's 6 billion people, and will have many more billions in the future. How are the religions of the world going to interact, get along in this complex world? And in this document, it proclaims that the church respects all the religions of the world because all of them have a ray of truth in them, even though they have many differing opinions and a different attitude than the attitude and faith of the church. But we respect that ray of truth, and we respect the people that are following that way, even as we proclaim and preach and try to live up to being followers of Jesus ourselves, who is the way, the truth, and the life. But then, of all the religions of the world, in a special way, the document refers to Islam and says, quite frankly, well, we've had a bit of a rough history together, endless wars, conflicts, etc. But now's the moment to overcome that past. And the document says, we recognize that in Islam, Jesus is acknowledged as a prophet. Mary is seen as a great woman who gave virgin birth to Jesus. And the Muslims consider themselves children of Abraham. This gives us a lot of reason to try to live in peace with this other religion that we've had such a stormy history with. But then the document turns to Israel and Judaism and says just what I said at the beginning. Nothing makes sense of the gospel without the Hebrew Scriptures and that faith that was lived 1,700 years before Christ came on the scene. And the document asserts that this is the time for Christians and Jews to live in peace and mutual respect. With such a stormy history, it's a difficult thing to accomplish and to sustain. But it must be done if there's going to be any credibility to our proclaiming of Jesus, the way and truth and the life to the world. If we are fighting with those who are our elder brothers in faith, as John Paul II called the Jewish community, well, how credible can our message be? It's a very short document, but a powerful document. I think 500 years from now, when people look back on the 20th century, yes, they'll study World War I, World War II. Some people that are real history buffs will know something about the conflict of communism and capitalism. But the real historian will be saying, this one little document, a couple pages long, altered the attitude of Catholicism, which is the largest unified faith in the world, towards all of the other faiths in the world. And they responded in kind, we hope and pray, so that the attitude of religious tolerance entered the world on a very profound level. And this will make the future possible to have some semblance of order rather than chaos. So it was an inspired and remains an inspiring document for us. In today's gospel passage, Jesus is talking about responsibility. We have the faith, and that's a great blessing. So we know what's right and wrong, good and evil. So are we going to live our lives in drunkenness and violence and beating up on our fellow human beings, literally and figuratively? Or are we going to live in a responsible way with the message we have received? It is very important to answer that question. The apostle says, does this apply to us? And Jesus said, look, I've told you how to live your life. And if you don't live it that way, boy, are you going to get a licking. Because you know clearly how you're to live and love, to give alms, to take care of the poor and the needy, to be one of my disciples, to look out for the weak, the widow, the orphan, as the prophets of Israel had said. And if you just live it up, take it easy in this life, there'll be a great judgment on you. Now, other people might do the same, but they really don't know right from wrong. Well, they'll still be liable to the punishment because everybody in their heart of hearts really knows what's good and evil. But they'll receive a less severe judgment. So it's quite a big challenge to us who have been given the gift of faith to live our lives in joy and generosity, respecting others, and trying to pass on to the generations to come that love that God has for all peoples. The good news is we're not relying on our own strength, but on the strength of the Spirit that we call holy in the midst of the church, which is universal, in the midst of a church which is united in its desire to proclaim the gospel of Jesus' way, truth, and life to the world, and more importantly, to proclaim it by our actions and attitudes, which should be seen as truly godly.